If you run a company or manage a team, hiring qualified people quickly can make or break your business. Imagine a position of need going unfilled for weeks or even months because you just can't seem to find the right candidate. When it comes to hiring, Indeed is all you need. Stop struggling to get your job post seen on other job sites. Indeed sponsored jobs help you stand out and hire fast. With sponsored jobs, your post jumps to the top of the page for your relevant candidates so you can reach the people you want faster. This makes a huge difference. According to Indeed data, sponsored jobs posted directly on Indeed have 45% more applications than non-sponsored jobs. Plus, there's no monthly subscriptions, no long-term contracts. You only pay for results on your job post. Just in the last minute that I've been talking to you, 23 hires were made on Indeed, according to Indeed data worldwide. Now that is fast. There's no need to wait any longer. Speed up your hiring right now with Indeed. Listeners will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/BWN. Go to Indeed.com/BWN right now to support this podcast. Indeed.com/BWN. Terms and conditions apply.
From your favorite source for Chicago White Sox talk, delivering news, interviews, analysis, and more. This is the Sox Machine Podcast with your hosts, Jim Margulis, James Fegan, and Josh Nelson.
Thanks, Rob, and welcome to a new episode of the Sox Machine Podcast. I'm your host, Josh Nelson, and it's Monday night, February 17, 2025, as we record this new episode. The Chicago White Sox first spring training game against the Chicago Cubs will be this upcoming Saturday, February 22nd, so just a few days away before getting to see game action. In this episode, we are going to hear from White Sox manager Will Venable and players Andrew Benintendi and Colson Montgomery. But a big focus of this episode is what our beat reporter James Fegan has learned early in Arizona. The amount of work that this White Sox front office is having to endure in an attempt to catch up to the rest of Major League Baseball. You can read his excellent feature on SoxMachine.com, but we'll share our thoughts on how the shortfalls, especially in data management and technology, both in the international and minor leagues, has driven the White Sox organization where they are today and how this new front office, led by Chris Getz, is trying to recover. We'll also recap the opening weekend of college baseball as James got a chance to see one of the top teams this weekend, and I'll share some notes of what I saw when it comes to MLB draft coverage. In the end, we'll talk about MLB action as Alex Bregman signs with the Boston Red Sox, and Mike Trout is getting ready for a new position. Monday, February 17th was the first day all Chicago White Sox players arrived at camp. Manager Will Venable was happy how the first day went as he addressed the players, laying down expectations for this camp.
First day was great. It was really exciting. It was great to see everybody in person and get to see them out on the field doing their thing. Everybody looked great. I thought the flow of our day was great. Really happy with day one. It was important to get in front of the group and talk about some of the things that, that we expect in the clubhouse, that we expect, out on the field, and then just set the tone for how we're going to use camp to help us prepare for the season.
A big focus of White Sox spring training will be on Luis Robert Jr. Even though a trade doesn't appear to be imminent, that won't stop the daily questions about how Robert is faring as he tries to bounce back from a disappointing 2024 season. So far, Venable is happy in what he sees from Luis Robert Jr.
He looked great. His swing looked great. He was out there with the live defense, moving really well. So very excited to see him out there running around. Make no mistake, he is our center fielder, and he's going to spend the majority of the time there. I think trying to get him through this first part of the season and being mindful of workload is going to be something that we have to do. And what that looks like, we'll talk to him. We'll collaborate as a group to kind of figure out, is that a day off here and there? Is that a DA spot here and there? But make no mistake, he's our center fielder.
with a focus on trying to keep Robert Jr. as healthy as possible, immediately brings the March and April weather in Chicago front of mind. The first 25 games of 2025 has the White Sox either in Chicago, the Midwest, as in Minneapolis, Cleveland, and Detroit, or in the Northeast in Boston. They don't play a game in warmer climate until late April when they visit Sacramento to play the Athletics. Venable in Arizona during February is already trying to be mindful of the playing climate.
That's a good question. I mean, we're going to be out there and we know it's going to be cold. Our conversations about it have really been about using it as a competitive advantage for us because we know it's cold and it's not going to be going anywhere. But yeah, we do need to be thoughtful, and I think we have some discussions to have as far as what exactly that looks like.
Andrew Benintendi arrived in Glendale hoping to continue his second half success hitting-wise. In his last 60 games of 2024, Benintendi did have an .830 OPS, which was fueled by a .502 slugging percentage as he hit 13 home runs and had 12 doubles. He mentioned that the poor first half performance got to him.
Getting off to a slow start definitely, wore on me a little bit. I think, you try to, make up so much for, one or two at bats, and you try to take it day by day. I think, the second half, I stuck with the stance. I had a little toe tap to where the first half I was between the leg lift and a toe tap. So just find the consistency and the timing with the toe tap in the second half definitely helped.
Venable already doubling down that Benintendi, despite his overall poor play since joining the White Sox, will be one of the lineup's anchors in 2025.
Yeah, for him to be out there and do what he does at the plate. He's going to be one of our guys right in the middle of the lineup the whole year. So really excited that he's coming in healthy and feeling good, and I'm looking forward to him picking up where he left off last year.
Benintendi was asked when he struggles, how does he handle that mentally, and who does he seek for advice? While he has a good relationship with White Sox coaches, it's still his dad who knows his swing best.
No, I think you kind of bounce ideas off of everybody, that'll listen, and, maybe they got some good feedback for you. But for me, I think obviously the hitting coach is here, and the ultimate hitting coach, my dad. I think, he's seen my swing. He probably knows it better than me. He watches every game, so he'll chime in here and there and tell me what he sees. And, sometimes I resent him for it. Maybe he said, why are you swinging that curveball in the dirt? I guess I thought it was a fastball. But, he knows my swing the best. And, bouncing ideas off him and him telling me what he sees definitely helped.
Colson Montgomery is entering his second camp and is already handling it better than last year.
Yeah, I would say my first big league camp I was a little more nervous than I am now, just because I kind of know how things are going to be run, and I don't know, I just kind of a little bit more of a peace of mind now, just because I kind of know how things are going to be run, and at the same time I've figured out my routines and how to be a pro about things, and also just how to talk to all these veterans, and just go about my business the right way.
Colson spoke with general manager Chris Getz about what's the expectations and opportunity for him during this spring training.
I'm expecting a lot of opportunity and a lot of competition. That's kind of what Chris Getz has been saying, and Skip has also been saying the same thing. So I think it's very, very fortunate for this opportunity. A lot of opportunity, a lot of competition. That's basically all I got to say. Yeah, of course I want to see myself at a big level, but also there's a lot of really good players also competing for jobs and things like that. So I'm going to respect whatever decision they have, but I'm going to do whatever I can to help the team win.
Sox Machine, along with their friends from the 108, will once again be hosting Opening Day Eve on Wednesday night, March 26th at the Remova Theater. Located in Bridgeport, the Remova Theater is where we will host our live podcast previewing Opening Day, making our bold predictions for the 2025 season, and the typical silliness that comes with plenty of hashtag 108ing. Doors open at 6 p.m. The show will start at 7:30. Remova will feature new beers from their tap room, and you have to try the terrific food from the Remova Grill. Tickets are $20 plus fees in advance, and it will be $25 day of the event. To purchase tickets for Opening Day Eve, visit this website, removachicago.com/shows, and click on the Opening Day Eve link for March 26th, or you can also click on the purchase link for this podcast post.
At Sierra, discover top workout gear at incredible prices, which might lead to another discovery. Your headphones haven't been connected this whole time. Awkward. Discover top brands at unexpectedly low prices. Sierra, let's get moving.
With President's Day savings at the Home Depot, you can get up to 35% off select appliances like LG. Plus, save up to an extra $450 on select appliances. And with customizable kitchen packages, we make it easy to shop and swap for the features you want. Like the 3-door French door refrigerator with slow melting round craft ice. Shop President's Day savings and get up to 35% off select appliances like LG, America's most reliable line of appliances. The Home Depot, how doers get more done. America's most reliable line of appliances per independent study. See store online for details. Minimum purchase required.
Daredevil is born again on Disney+. Why did you stop being a vigilante? The line was crossed. Sometimes peace needs to be broken. And chaos must reign. On March 4th, the 9-episode event begins. I was raised to believe in grace, but I was also raised to believe in retribution. Marvel Television's Daredevil, Born Again. Don't miss the 2-episode premiere March 4th, only on Disney+.
Joining me now from Glendale, Arizona is the Sox Machine beat reporter James Fegan, and from Nashville, Tennessee is the managing editor of SoxMachine.com. It's Jim Margulis. And hello, gentlemen. James, how was Monday at spring training camp?
As temperate as it's been the entire time. But there were moments where I just wanted to take my fleece and throw it into the wind and never look back at it again, as I live in this desert paradise, which is the perfect conditions. Live here all year long. I don't know why anyone wouldn't. I'm in heaven. But Luis Robert, basically all the position players were present yesterday, which would be Sunday. But this was like the first time you saw everybody kind of going through the drills and hitting live VPs and seeing like Robert and Martin Perez kind of like going back and forth and like why he laid off a pitch and what he saw early was kind of like fun little scene. People do baseball in person. I can't say there's a big crowd outside White Sox camp to see, but in less tortured circumstances are what we all enjoy about this time of year.
Jim, do you still get excited when you see the videos of them actually doing things at spring training?
Not right now. I mean, normally I would if this were like an 80-win White Sox team. Be like, yeah, it's good to see them back. It's good to have the promise of a new season and have the possibility of variance carrying them to the postseason. But in this case, it's nice, better than the alternative, which is, the season still being months away, but there is none of that. Can't wait to see what these guys do. It's more like I hope it's watchable in parts, which last year was not.
Yeah, I could see some just being really cynical and be like, damn it. They're getting closer to playing. But no, I'm excited. This gets me going. It's great to see action again. As I mentioned in the intro, Saturday against the Chicago Cubs, February 22nd, we finally have game action. So not a lot of lead up for everyone that is showing up this week at spring training to get ready for the season, or at least the spring training season.
And also no spring training broadcast schedule yet, correct?
I
have not seen a release. I looked for it the other day thinking, did I miss it? But right now,
Big
nothing.
was in the building today, but he didn't have a schedule with him. So I assume he is calling a lot of college basketball out here, and he is obviously like doing reporting and talking to people about the team and, informing himself. But I imagine he's out here to call some games.
Yes. Of course, those games, if they are going to be broadcast at all, will be on the Chicago Sports Network, CHSN, which the Sports Broadcast Journal released the NBA rating so far this year. Not going well for the Chicago Bulls. So this will be a bigger story as we get closer to opening day, something that we're keeping an eye on as CHSN is trying to get themselves on a Comcast, but that hasn't been the case quite yet. Once we do get that schedule, you could find it on SoxMachine.com so we could all be able to watch the games together. But what I want to start is James's excellent feature that was on SoxMachine.com on Monday, February 17th. Named White Sox Seek a More Perfect Union. And with this feature, it highlights the shortfalls that key current White Sox front office personnel are trying to overcome leftover from the previous regime. And the big bullet point items, in case that you didn't get a chance to read it, or you did read it and you got angry and you stopped halfway through and you went straight to the comment section. Bullet point number 1, getting international scouts the same evaluation scale as the White Sox amateur and pro scouts. They weren't previously. And there's been a lot of reporting in recent days that many White Sox international scouts have been fired. Second, getting portable TrackMan and blast motion units to track player progression for the new international site in the Dominican Republic. So that will be new, getting new equipment down there. Install the Hawkeye tracking technology at every White Sox minor league affiliate. By the way, this technology was introduced in 2019 when Major League Baseball switched from TrackMan to Hawkeye. So Guarantee Rate Field and now Rate Field has had Hawkeye at that stadium since 2019. And also another fun fact, more than 175 NCAA schools this season are using TrackMan at their stadiums. And the White Sox were the only Major League Baseball team not taking advantage of the Google Cloud that was housing the leagues and the 29 other teams' StatCast data. James, is there anything else that I'm missing out of those big 4 bullet points that I got from your feature that the White Sox front office this past off season has addressed? They have hired people, they have ordered the technology, they've got the technology, and they are implementing these big items.
So like, this was everything here was like kind of like examples of kind of the issues they're dealing with. So like the main thing I've been trying to work on a story of like, all right, when you say infrastructure improvement, like what do you mean? What's going to look different? What was wrong before? And I wouldn't necessarily say like these are like the 4 problems they dealt with, but like these were kind of 4 like scenarios or like different like brands of issues that like popped up that kind of are representative of all the little disconnects that they've been trying to like stamp out over the past year. So like not housing their stuff on Google Cloud was like this basic stuff of like we're just not kind of up to speed with the rest of the league or taking advantage of whatever every league is doing, or having kind of the clean process of how everybody contributes to something and everybody can draw it out that they other teams have. Like, and one of the things, examples that we'll walk through is like, yeah, of course we have data on like what our pitchers throw and where it works, where they should attack certain hitters, but we literally like don't have the system to where everything's just like connected to where we could actually just print it out and make a wristband the catchers wear during games, like you see like every other organization doing. And I think Hawkeye at the affiliates was something that like they all emphasize is really important. And I feel like that one in terms of just like tracking data or like having that level of proficiency in what they're seeing, they felt like it was affecting them on multiple levels in terms of being as quick as they need to be in recognizing like how other teams are attacking them, being as fine as they want to be in terms of evaluating their own defense or other teams' defense, or being really efficient about base running. Example those kind of walk through is like, I think gets even as a quote about it is like saying like, we don't need the difference between us and like other teams, like on base running value is not sprint speed per se. It's just like not having the level of detail that some of these like teams that are really efficient about implementing their motion data are doing on like primary and secondary leads. Like if we just fixed our leads, we could be in that, or we feel like we're not really getting precise data or motion tracking of our minor leaguers, and we're not valuing defense the way they are. And that's especially pressing to them because they're facing this situation, especially like the budget that they've gotten, both for last season and this one, where it's like, we're going to need to be this hyper efficient team. Like they'll all say, and they're optimistic, like, hey, when it's contention time, we'll spend more, but they know it's not going to be like, top 5 payroll in the game, like return to spend more. It's, hopefully keeping up with the raises of all like your core players as they mature into a contention window, not being able to regularly rely on, just being really at the top of the market in free agency. Maybe not regularly, maybe not ever, for all I know. They're certainly not viewing their revenue situation with the stadium and being on television uncertainty hanging over them as something that's like going to get better at some specific point. And we can debate whether or not they're getting enough of the team revenue being distributed to baseball operations, whether the White Sox should spend into deficit to fix the product. But from a baseball operations perspective, they're like, well, this is what we know we're getting based on like how the team's performing. So we have to adjust. They have to become like this lean and mean team from their standpoint. Like I think Bannister had a great line, like if we're not going to be able to keep the Crochets and Ceases, two guys as they traded with 2 years of control left. Obviously, like maybe if they're contending, that it doesn't become so much of a firewall, but really only having these guys for 4 years, they're going to need to be really efficient at like creating them very regularly. They can't be like this 1 a year super expensive acquisition. Like, oh, this was our first round pick, or oh, this was like we traded our best position player on our major league roster for it, like type of talent, like something that only comes around once or twice a year. They have to kind of produce them in ancillary rounds. Like, and they think just like not having this data, both internationally and domestically in terms of their scouting, just leads them to going very routes that are inefficient. Like they felt like they have overvalued right quarterbacks consistently over the last couple of years. And the teams like the Brewers or the Guardians that they're seeing around them are not teams that are regularly spending a lot of capital on getting these sort of like bat first corner guys who can obviously spike a lot of value in free agency with their offensive numbers, or we get paid really well in arbitration because their offensive numbers. It's finding a lot of guys who are sneakily giving you 2 to 3 win seasons through defense or kind of secondary skills that aren't going to spike their value very much, and both finding them inexpensively like through trade or on the market, or creating them a lot. And so they feel like we can't be like this old school scouting org, because the guys who glow up in old school scouting reports are guys who traditionally get paid very well. They're going to need to be finding a competitive advantage somewhere. It's probably not going to be exactly what the Guardians do. It's probably not going to be exactly what the Brewers are. They offer up Bannister as probably their first candidate of what that's going to be, but they need to find it. So they feel like they need to become a really efficient org, and instead they inherited an org that they feel like was just racked with inefficiencies. And the kind of description I got was like it wasn't intentionally everything siloed from each other, but there wasn't ever this big effort like there was in the last year to like, hey, everything needs to be organized and sync with each other. So there's just a lot of different departments that kind of grew on their own without necessarily being connected to one another and informing one another, or the sum regularly being less than what's the phrase? The whole is less than the sum of its parts, kind of regularly for them. So I would say the issues that I lined out in the feature are the totality, or even maybe the 4 biggest ones. It's just very representative, they felt, of just a very messy data pipeline where they could have somebody with a great idea at one point in the organization, and getting it to where it's actually implemented another side is a long, non-linear journey that doesn't often get completed.
Well, Jim, after James's excellent feature and explaining some of the problems that the White Sox front office is currently facing right now and trying to overcome, I get why when Chris Getz was hired and Jerry Reinsdorf thought this was the hire for the quickest turnaround on the pivot a couple months later in that same offseason to now, in which Chris Getz doesn't want to define a timeline when this team is going to be winning, because there's quite a bit of work to do.
Yeah, I think one of my unresolved questions about the Chris Getz promotion is whether he told Reinsdorf, I can fix this quickly. Like, I have what it takes. Rick Hahn, Kenny Williams are not getting it done. They need somebody like me in there to get this team back to respectability. Or if he said something along the lines of, I'm seeing where the inefficiencies are. I don't have the authority. Perhaps because I know I can get a head start on this. And Reinsdorf heard what he wanted to hear, which is like, yeah, I can turn around in a hurry. This is my only public appearance of the decade, so I can just, spout off a half-baked, rationale for why I'm doing this, and then disappear back into the shadows, and fans and media will be left on their own to figure it out. Like, I could see it either way. Like, if Getz really wanted the job, I could see him saying what he needed to say, and then I'll fix it later. Or I'll deal with the blowback of adjusting the timeline after the fact. I got the job, so that's that's really objective A, and everything else can be adjusted afterwards. So, like, that's, I think, really my only question at this point. Gets the GM, he's hired a bunch of people, so there's no, it's more like an unresolved question, just something in the back of my mind for when Getz is trying to set future expectations. Like, is he insane, or is he just canny and can kind of see, how to work Reinsdorf a little bit, which, is to his advantage. I think it's both unhealthy and healthy. Like, unhealthy, just how much rot there was. And it does invite questions about like whether Reinsdorf will let it happen again once, he makes investments like, the lean and mean research and development team that James referred to, them describing their department as, my question is it lean and mean because you can't make 60 hires at once? It's better to make a small group of hires, set the agenda, kind of establish the base things, and then hire more people once you discover what paths you can use those resources towards. I think that's like what the Royals did last year. I think they added like 7 or 8 people. And that makes sense versus like trying to hire 60 and say, okay, let's organize this in 2 months and have a bunch of people working on different things and not speaking to each other. And then you have the same inefficiency issues that you've had all along. Like, if they're following the Royals game plan, as far as like, we need new information pipeline, we need a whole new architecture. Let's set that up and then expand as we go. Once we figure out where to direct resources. Like, if that's the plan, cool. If it's going to be lean and mean for the next 5 to 7 years, that's probably not much better than where they were. It's probably just incrementally better. So that's an unresolved question as well. Also, it does shed some light in terms of, I guess, not shed some light necessarily, but invite smarter questions in terms of like, why was Rick Hahn saying the things he was saying all those years, in terms of saying that, we like people to think that we're behind the times in terms of analytics. We might have an advantage there. Was he saying it because that's all he could say? And, he knew that he wasn't getting his way. Was he not arguing for better information and making it up, afterwards, because like he just needed to say something? He had that real condescending turn towards the end before the bottom fell out and the record was the record, and he couldn't really, bloviate his way out of it. But I wonder if that was just, frustration from not being able to deliver on the money was spent promise, not being able to make any upgrades that he wanted. And now it's just a matter of like, just getting irritated all the time and taking it out on critics he thought were being unfair. But, if there was this case of like Hahn wanting to make changes and just kind of being in a position of fecklessness to where like he just didn't have the authority to make change. Kenny overruled him on anything major, and he could not get the resources to add major players. So he just had to try to sign big extensions and hope that would create some leverage that he might be able to, use, financial resources that he might not have otherwise. And, kind of go back to the 2014 playbook. Like, that's, it makes it more interesting in terms of like what his role was and how it all fell apart for him. But so far, like, it's a case where I think Getz is doing what he needs to do and untangle the mess that he's untangled, to hire people that have some say in terms of what successful organizations do. Now I think it's just a matter of building on it and keep making those, $100,000 hires that help provide better data, help provide better direction up and down the chain as they flesh this out. Like, this is not a place to stall. If they're not going to be making the uh, big dollar acquisitions, if they are modeling the Brewers, in which they can maybe splurge once a decade, but otherwise they have to be real smart about how they direct resources and really succeed on the margins, then they're in that direction. They just have to commit to that direction and keep fleshing out this modern infrastructure they're seeking.
It's just a bit baffling to me because this is a big data problem in which every company in this planet has been battling since the mid 2010s, if not before then, because companies just wanted better answers. Like, who are our customers? Where are they coming from? Amazon, Google provide all these platforms that we can utilize, and we can track our customers and how they interact with us on the website and then social media. So a lot of those things that type of tracking's been around since 2012. I mean, Vox Media was utilizing, I assume, Jim, when we were running Southside Sox back in the day, giving some insight on how the analytics were working with the website and how people were interacting, especially like Google AdWords, for example. So like what we do on the content side has been around for a while. To hear this, at least from my perspective, it's like, damn, let's go back 10 years in time and be like, before you start this new rebuild, okay, White Sox, this new thing called StatCast is going to be really important. You're going to want this for all of your levels. So figure out how the technology works, figure it out, you can get in the affiliates, so you can have better data, better analysis, understand which guys are your stars and which guys can be great role players. And you can develop everyone at the same time. To go back to our previous episode, in which that's what Keith Law, looking at the White Sox farm system, that was his constructive criticism. The White Sox need more players. They probably have more stars than role players, but they need all sorts of players right now in their farm system if they're going to start turning this around and start winning. So this was an excellent feature, James. So terrific job in getting this information. So when it comes to the near future, long-term future, the White Sox need to continue this investment. They need to keep people. That would be the big thing within the front office to start seeing some of these gains. It still may take 2 to 4 years to see on how these investments help out to translate to results on the field. But in the short term, are there any key metrics that were brought to your attention that the White Sox do want to focus on, especially with all these new Hawkeye technology implementations throughout the minor league affiliates?
Yeah, I didn't include the part where Bannister talked about the R&D team having like a hacker house because it sounded like a scene from The Social Network. But so like the things that he something we talked about when we spoke at length, which I'll probably be picking at for a lot of articles coming up, was that last year, especially when those StatCast numbers came out, but obviously teams have like the internal bat tracking numbers before that. The White Sox were like the worst team, or had the lowest bat speed in the league, team wide, and that's while employing Luis Robert. And
wow, I did not know that.
He was saying that, and when we got to pitching, he really couldn't drill on one. He was saying like if you could pick one metric to be like what's the biggest value add for hitting, it's bat speed. And catching is obviously super complicated and lots of things, but if you could pick like one metric where like it's producing the most value unique to that position, it'd be pitch framing. They were 28th in StatCast's pitch framing metrics last year. So it was like, as they're coming off this awful season, which was very difficult, have a lot of consequences for years to come, and a black eye for the franchise, but definitely made like all arguments to ownership about like what we need to do a lot more straightforward. It's like, all right, well, we need to invest in what we need to generate bat speed. So all of a sudden, like, hey, that we need to make this higher for director of hitting. This is something we absolutely need. That comes a lot straightforward. Hey, Ryan Fuller wants a traject machine. He really loved high-speed training. Yeah, we think this is really necessary. And now there's one in spring training, and it's going to get shipped to Chicago, for when the season starts. And obviously Will Venable's part of it, and he had a little familiarity, but the hire of Walker McKinnon as bench coach, somebody who has this big reputation for catching defense, on top of finally having like you had Jerry Narron during the La Russa tenure, as he had a different title, but he was a catching coach. But Drew Butera was the first person with that role, title, catching coach. When other teams that had catching coaches on staff, during like the kind of first rebuild years, the White Sox were kind of slow adopters of that. And I thought, especially when they were trying to make Zach Collins happen, that not kind of loading up on that front was something I always like looked askance at the time. So he was saying like these are two big areas, big value adds that we're just kind of punting a little bit by not really drilling down on it, that instead we want to like turn the sliders all the way up, and feeling like that's a big area where they invested this offseason. And obviously when we talk about investments, there's a real ceiling to how the AAV of the offers they were putting out. Martin Perez was the cap, and even they did some funky like mutual option works to defer some costs on that. But a lot of it was like, hey, if we're not gonna, we're willing to whatever trade-offs we need to do for this offseason free agency, like this is what matters, this is what we need to fix. And that theme is a lot of like they're willing to kind of tolerate whatever ugliness, because like anything they even did in the short term was going to be undercut by not addressing this type of stuff if they didn't do if they pushed it off for any period of time. So it's almost like, why bother? Spend a lot to build the same teams that like fell on their faces the last 2-3 years, essentially, if you don't have the infrastructure in place. So they feel like those are two big areas that they kind of drilled down on. Now, I thought it was funny that like for Bannister, who's like a dyed in the wool pitching guy, it's easier for him to like give this straight answer of like, well, bat speed's the most important thing for hitting, or framing's the biggest value add for pitching or for catching. I was like, all right, so are you willing to be this like as unromantic about pitching and say like stuff or command is more important? And then all of a sudden the answer got a lot longer, which I thought was funny. But the thing that are drilling down on with the pitching staff a lot is that like strikeouts are really expensive. The cost of pitching that they said, I think if you don't have the money for it, the cost of pitching always seems expensive every offseason. But they certainly said like, oh, it was very exorbitant. Like, obviously the deal, like, people like Max Fried or Frankie Montas got was definitely, you were hearing talk of the market feeling like that was inflated. And, then the Garrett Crochet deal happens from a team that, doesn't want to, spend another huge bounty on starting pitching. But they weren't able to really acquire, and they're not at this point in the with their win cycle or their how much budget they're getting to really acquire these high octane arms, or the ones that are really proven or have success in a way that's really repeatable of just missing bats. So what Bannister is saying is that they're pretty loaded up. Like, one, they're just trying to, if you throw up a funky angle, if you have a uniquely low release height, if you have like some sort of like weird characteristic, like, and you're on the waiver wire, the White Sox are probably picking you up. Brandon Eisert, their waiver wire for like I want to say a week and a half ago, he like drops down and like throws from like barely 5 feet high, and it's like everything looks like it's a sweeper, but he doesn't actually throw a sweeper. Like Penn Murphy, if you watch like both, if you watch Penn Murphy pitch or just try to take a still image, like every still image of him looks like he's like got injured mid delivery and is like falling over, because he does this like weird like underhand like kind of, he literally became a pitcher by like throwing the way he did as an infielder, because he was a hitter in college. So they're just getting every funky release angle they can got. And another thing he was saying is that like a lot of these arms that they added were scouted in terms of like hopefully being like big four seam blow you away types, but he really thinks they're heavy on guys who can use seam effects and can kind of do a lot of like late movement, weak contact items. Like Sean Burke is, obviously what he did that was really good down the stretch last season was, his fastball was as liable as you've seen it since he's joined the organization, like regularly getting 95, 96, and he was blowing a lot of people away up top. But he's been adding a two-seamer all spring, basically like maybe I'm not going to be at top velo every night, or maybe I'm going to be facing a lineup that's geared up to try to take it away from me, and I'm going to do a lot of try to run it in on people and work east west in a way that my game's not currently acclimated to, and trying to get quick outs. And I think with Bannister's like last two stops kind of signal this, because like Boston was super like tons of fastball, tons of spin, and they just threw four seams away and blew away. And then he didn't have that in Giants, and you saw them with that ballpark do a lot of like guys who work east west, throw sinkers, get balls in the ground. Logan Webb. I think we know what like talent level the White Sox are working at, and so they're very much going more the Giants direction of that. And he's just anything that sees Logan Webb, like seems like Logan Webb, like keen on that and trying to make it work. So you're seeing a lot of guys throwing seam shifted changeups, a lot of guys adding something that moves horizontally to what might have been a north south attack, and you're seeing a lot of guys that are just naturally weird because they pick them up because they throw from a weird angle. And that's kind of because they can't get the top of the scale when they go out for guys who throw a traditional method. They're getting all the weirdos they can, and you're just not going to see a fastball from a traditional high three quarters all night when he comes to Chicago. Like that's to be their rallying cry. Like, you may beat us, but it's going to look weird the whole time. You're not going to feel all the way comfortable. You're going to see something atypical, and maybe you'll overcome it. Maybe you'll be too weirded out, and it'll be one of our 65 wins.
So
it also feels like a Brooks Boyer marketing. Come see our weird fastballs.
So the White Sox finally addressing their big data issue. This could have ramifications in a good way throughout all the levels, because now having the Hawkeye, they're going to be able to, hopefully, fingers crossed, identify internally more of these guys that they can develop. I think Steve Cohen, when he bought the New York Mets, and of course hiring David Stearns to take over as a president, from a Mets perspective, yeah, Steve Cohen's got all the money in the world, and he's spending it now, but he also wants to build some homegrown talent, because drafting guys and developing them, you get a lot more value than you have to. There's only so many Juan Sotos in Major League Baseball. At some point, the Mets are going to have to start developing their own talent, but they spent a lot of cash on free agency to buy themselves time to get that type of talent developed in their lower systems. Jerry Reinsdorf's not going to spend like Steve Cohen. So now that you have this White Sox front office and the new guys coming in, Jim, identifying this, helping Chris Getz convince Jerry Reinsdorf that we need to make this type of investment. Are you cool in 4 to 5 years if the Chicago White Sox never return back to the $170, $180 million payroll, but instead are consistently between $120 and $140 million, and letting guys go early in arbitration because they're just doing a better job identifying through the draft and through the international markets and developing guys that once somebody comes to their 4th year and they hit arbitration, if they're just a 1.5 WAR player and they think they can replace them on a league minimum contract with a rookie, that's going to be the kind of White Sox organization we may see a lot more churn and burn.
It depends on what kind of attendance and TV ratings they're getting and what kind of revenue situation is. Because right now in this current landscape where they've alienated their fan base and their games are right now unviewable on major cable packages, and you have to either sign up for an app or get an antenna and really go out of your way to watch the games live. Because I assume if you have an antenna, you don't have like a recording feature, so you have to make plans to be able to watch the game, and nobody's going to make plans around the White Sox unless you're us.
They're not making plans around the Bulls. I mean, the Bulls viewing ratings are down 67%.
So unless you're us and you have to watch the games, or you have nothing else going, and just it's just a habit and you feel like you're not whole unless you're watching the White Sox on a given Tuesday night, you're not going to be making that effort. Now, like let's say they're on Comcast, like the TV streaming market reconsolidates because everybody realizes how absurd it is to have like 12 streaming services and alongside a basic either cable package or YouTube TV package. You get all live channels, and it's just really stupid. And so there is kind of a reconfiguration, and the White Sox are back on like a viewable package, and like, either the lowest tier or like the middle tier that they want to get to with Comcast. And the ratings are fine, and they're drawing 2 million a year. And if they're doing that and they're still spending 140 million, then they're just being cheap. And they're not commanding the market power that Chicago is. And we never saw that with the White Sox, because like they would spend 180 million, everything would fall apart, or they would spend like a top 10 payroll, and then the bottom would fall out, and they just never made the postseason 2 years in a row. And I don't even count like 2020 anymore in terms of making the postseason 2 years in a row, because fans couldn't sign up for it. Fans couldn't get tickets for it. There was no big postseason boost. And they were they wouldn't have made the postseason in a standard year. And they were falling apart anyway at the 60 game mark. So like, I wouldn't really consider it being we made the postseason 2 years in a row. We won the division 2 years in a row. We built that momentum of fan excitement, which is really the whole point of making the postseason 2 years in a row, that you build some season ticket momentum. You build TV ratings, you make it a hot ticket. Like, they did not do any of that the last time around. And so we've never seen the White Sox command Chicago the way that Chicago can be commanded by a winning team that's exciting. So that's, I think, where I can't really put a number on it in terms of what they should be spending. The Rays spend what they spend because they're undercapitalized. They don't really have a whole lot of, they don't have a whole lot of natural drawing power because of where they're situated. And, the ownership doesn't spend money to make money. So they've done a very creative job in terms of working around that. But at the same time, fans expect the players that they like to leave, and so they don't get attached, and so they're just they kind of kept at arm's length. I think the Brewers are a better fit in terms of when they're good, they draw 3 million, and they can occasionally afford a Ryan Braun or a Christian Yelich contract for a player that really makes sense. And the fans haven't completely given up on and like Jackson Churio, another like contract, like they can really be excited about. Like, they can spend on a player that makes sense to them. And so fans just aren't completely nihilistic about, after 5 years, they're going to leave. So to me, that's like the more realistic piece, or like the more realistic, I guess, place that they can occupy in the baseball landscape. But, if the Cubs are down and the White Sox are up and they're making the postseason 2 years in a row, they should be drawing, 2.5 million to 3 million and doing well on TV. And at that point, when you factor in like the jersey and cap sales that they've never really, in terms of like having a star player with that uniform, with that jersey, having a greater mind share in Major League Baseball, they've squandered all their built-in advantages for decades. And so I don't want to rule out what it looks like, if they do somehow win the division 2 years in a row. So I think that's a long ways away. Right now, I think you're talking at least 4 or 5 years until they have that kind of window where they feel great about what they're doing. But I think, I think the Brewers are the more realistic target, where they can actually set their sights higher than being bottom half. And we're seeing that right now with Seattle. I think that's what Seattle, everybody's frustrated with them. They draw well. They theoretically should be able to spend more, but they just kind of run in place. Jerry DiPoto trades a lot of guys, never actually builds anything, and shoots for 54 or a 540 winning percentage and hopes that sells excitement. And after a while, just fans are like, why are we showing up for this if their aims aren't as high as they should be? And so I think that's what the White Sox have to juggle when they get there. Right. But right now, like, if they won 70 games, everybody would be ecstatic. So that discussion's still a long ways away.
Yeah. Everybody in baseball wants their team to spend like the Mets and the Dodgers and the Yankees. In theory, maybe they could for a couple of people, but not like to the scale that those teams can. And with the White Sox having their revenue issues, I feel like from a baseball ops standpoint, this is a really smart investment on their end. And I could see the path. I could see the vision We have to fix our big data issue. Once we've done that, we're going to have a lot better insight, which is going to help us in our player development issues, patch that up. We're going to start developing guys that are actual major leaguers. And theoretically, that should translate to more wins. And once we start piling up wins, and I think that is the end game here for baseball ops, to get back to where the White Sox are just consistently an 80-plus win team every single season, to at least build up some confidence. But if you're listening to this podcast hoping that the White Sox are having the same spending issues as Cubs fans are having to deal with their current ownership group and all the investments they made around the ballpark, and it's not turning into stars being signed by the team, I don't know under the current ownership if we're going to have that type of discussion. It may require new ownership, and even then, we still may be at least 5 years away from having those types of conversations. But at least the White Sox are fixing the big data issue.
Yeah, I think big data, and also it's a case of right now with Chris Getz being seemingly the single decision maker. So far, that promise is held up. Another thing thinking about it is because I'm trying to think, were they so delusional about their chances if they're so far behind, and if people allegedly knew that they were behind and had to modernize? But I think, going back to all the postmortems about just how everything fell apart and the rebuild collapsed into the losing a season, thinking back to the idea that like Rick Hahn's employees and Kenny Williams' employees didn't get along, and he had like Jeremy Haber and Kenny Williams Jr. getting into knife fights over what the agendas they wanted to set. And so like, perhaps that's really, solving that and having everybody united under one vision will resolve a lot. Maybe I think we're like maybe 2 years away from learning just how many obstacles were self-imposed over the last 7 years of the Kenny Williams Rick Hahn era. And that'll only make that more embarrassing for them, for everybody involved in that window. But at the same time, like, I think when you think about just how even like during the 500 year under Tony La Russa's half season, like how they made baseball look so hard, and even in like going back in the 2010s, like they never made baseball look easy. Like Paul Konerko was he was the captain, but like he never made baseball look easy. He toiled, he wore his struggles. He had 5 billion different swings to make it work. He was not athletic, but like it felt like they just got so high on the idea of grinders and battling through it. And just like, how much of that was battling themselves and how much of it was just, getting in their own way and handicapping everything they attempted to do to build a team. And so I have this notion that just, maybe in a couple of years, once you start seeing some prospects matriculate and stick, that we'll have a much greater insight in just how basically they were just shooting themselves in the foot over and over again at the individual, 26-man or 25-man roster level at the time. And then even down to the affiliates, just everything is going wrong. Like, I'm really hoping that's the case where we can look back at it and maybe not laugh, but at least, laugh at them and not with them, I think is my goal.
Moving on. College baseball opening day, which really kicks off the MLB draft. And of course, as we talk about the White Sox big data issue, and they're not going to be able to spend a great deal of money, the draft is going to become more important in upcoming years. James got a chance to see one of the top programs in all of college baseball, Oregon State, this past weekend as he was down in Arizona. How did Oregon State look, James? Anyone catch your attention, catch your eye?
Well, they won 16-0, so they looked all right.
It's pretty good.
I remember hearing like first or second year on the beat, the practice of like sending the amateur scouts to watch like major league games to kind of like refresh their eyes, and I thought, oh, okay, it seems like kind of an old school concept. Like how necessary is that? Going to go see like the best freshman pitcher in the country and like texting like friends like, oh, there's velocity amped after the first inning. He doesn't really have a changeup yet. Like slider is a chase pitch. He doesn't throw for strikes. Can't double up on the curve in the zone, or else he gets hit hard. And then seeing like Twitter being like, Dax Whitney had the best like freshman debut ever. This guy's like amazing. I was like, maybe I do need to recalibrate a little bit. maybe the 19-year-old who can hit 97 with command, maybe he was a bit more of a prospect than I realized. And the guy for UNLV who had a really cool last name, I want to say is like Mercurius. Like he also hit like 96 in the first inning, and then also saw his like velo back up a lot after the adrenaline wore off. And he clearly just had like a lot less to work with than Dax Whitney had when that started happening. Like, yeah, Whitney couldn't bully with his fastball the way he did in the first inning, but like being able to drop in this big loopy curve for strikes in college baseball is like a very useful way to like get ahead in counts where like at least like if you have to like challenge someone with 93, like it's not as much of like a disadvantaged situation. And um while I think he's like this, very much in the, like this Noah Schultz, Higgins Smith, like super neighbor kind of thing. Like the fact that he's throwing 2 breaking balls already. Like I'm betting whatever changeup he's throwing right now is probably not what he throws in pro ball. But I think he threw 3 all day, but he faced his like leadoff hitter because he threw like 5 innings and went scoreless. That was like I think the first guy he faced like 3 times, and he like doubled up on changeups to him, and like he left both of them high, like so I wasn't like necessarily impressed by like the raw changeup, but like the leadoff hitter was like, what? Like, after like seeing 95 and like curveballs like all day. And I was like, all right, I like this kid now. Like that's a very funny thing to do. Your third time to the order. Just throw whatever, just make it something they haven't seen before. Obviously very promising.
Yeah.
I don't know how to pronounce his last name, but Ave Arquette, the shortstop. Seen some listings to 6'4". I think on the roster I had was 6'5". But very much like, is this like the Colson effect that like, on the one hand, like he does everything well enough. Like there's no reason to move him off shortstop as college, and like he has the actions, he has a little like comfort of like throwing underhand across the diamond, but it's just the size that I think at least the old school way of filtering just be like, no, third baseman, get over there. Like type when you look at him, especially as like a big power guy that he was, like he top spin some balls, so he didn't hit a homer in front of me, but like then later I looked up and saw that he hit it 114. I was like, all right, yeah, that's power wasn't the issue for why that ball didn't go over the fence. So I think he's going to be a high pick, especially if you can project him to stay in the middle of the infield with that level of raw pop, very Colson-y, where it's like, well, if he's got like present plus raw power and he's got any notion of staying at short, that's obviously a big time prospect. But it's like he does everything well enough. He's a good enough athlete. It's just like he's a good mover, but not like, it's either this or the NBA level athlete. But are we going to start seeing the guys who can, have the right actions, have the right confidence, are athletic enough to, at that size, get more of a shot to stick at shortstop going forward? And not really so much maybe post Colson, but more like post Carlos Correa, really being the model of where you're seeing, is that going to be a harbinger of like being more open-minded about who can stick there? So yeah, Oregon State's got dudes. I think probably everyone 1 through 4 of their order is going to get drafted, though. Some of them are different levels. I'm forgetting like his last
Gavin
name.
Turley's another one.
Turley, I saw him like whiff on a lot of off speed in that game. It was the first game of the season, but like that'd be something I'm watching out for him, especially if he's like one of the more lower weighted of that foursome, probably like a little bit lower on the scouting priority. Caraway, their third baseman, who I think like was a state like Mr. Baseball for California or Gatorade Player of the Year or something like that. It's not like the big power ceiling of Arquette, just because like the frame is not, but like did everything well. Seems like somebody who'd be taken before, and that you could see him performing, especially because this is his sophomore year. Maybe he just matches so much that he's the first rounder or kind of like a mid first rounder. He's not going to be like a tools freak. I think he's like 6'2", but is someone who just kind of does everything very competently. So you could, where if he puts up crazy numbers, maybe he's a mid-first round guy. If he doesn't take this big step forward, he's probably still like first 3 or 4 rounds type of dude, just looking at right now. So yeah, I thought they were good. I wasn't asked to watch anyone on UNLV, but I bet their starter, if he can, just got some projection left and is hitting 96 already, could be a reliever later. And in the first couple innings, I thought Dax Whitney was a reliever. So we'll see how a lot of it plays out.
Dax has still got 2 more years before he's draft eligible, James. I
was grading him like I was watching him in AAA.
I love it. I love it. I watched a lot of the action down in Arlington, Texas. Keith Law, who was just in our podcast, also wrote up his thoughts. He was there for The Athletic. I'll have my report on Arizona outfielder Brendan Summerhill for Sox Machine later this week in the MLB Draft Report. But to James's point, I am seeing a lot of college pitchers across the games in opening day throwing 94+ mile per hour fastballs. So whatever the college programs are doing during fall ball, getting these guys ramped up, the pitchers are ahead of the hitters for the most part, especially the elite starting pitchers. And they are throwing some serious gas. I think that's a good thing that will help us during this college baseball season when evaluating the top college bats, how they are handling velocity. And if they are struggling against velocity, that is not going to get easier for them as they get drafted and become professional baseball players. That is something that they're going to have to work on. There's a few guys in that opening weekend that I'll be writing about. That's a tease for you guys on SoxMachine.com to see my draft report on guys that I thought that had issue with velocity. And thanks to Keith Law's reporting, we know why one particular draft prospect that's ranked in the top 10 right now on the top 50 on SoxMachine.com and why they were having trouble with velocity. But Brendan Summerhill did hit a home run. So for all those Whitney Young grads, there you go. The alum did hit a home run. It was a bad weekend, though, for Arizona baseball in the opening weekend.
To add to your point, a lot of scouts, when they're like looking up college video of hitters, they will just take the video and filter it like 94 and above and just watch that. Like you're bashing 90 miles an hour in college, like they don't care because they want to see league average or above velocity against you. And
yeah, I mean, that's been my struggle doing this the last few years as well. Is like, hey, here's Andrew Vaughn hitting an 88 mile per hour fastball to the moon, but no one throws that hard in Major League Baseball anymore.
And when I was looking at my notes from Super 60, the 88 was and it was even just the guy who set 88 to 91 was the slowest fastball I saw in any of the.
And they're 17, right?
Yeah, they're 16, they're all high school seniors, entering their senior year. Obviously a very elite group. They're all committed to power programs, but there wasn't one crafty projectable guy. The 88 to 91 guy was the projectable dude. That's it's just gonna keep coming.
I'm going to just add this to the list. Next time we're in North Carolina, next time we go to Winston-Salem, I wonder if we just stop by Wake Forest and get a tour of their pitching lab and write a feature about that and get their insight, because these pitching labs in the college baseball level, crushing it on the development side. And I know White Sox fans don't want to hear the White Sox using first and second round picks on pitchers. But if that is what college baseball is developing, these elite arms that will not need a lot of time developing in the minor leagues and can join the majors soon, like we've seen with Hagen Smith, I'm already seeing an opening day, the top programs, these arms are elite. You get to Saturday, get to Sunday, the drop-off in pitching is quite evident. You get some crazy games going on, 16-5, or the game's just way more than 20 runs are scored. But the Friday night games are going to be a lot of fun this year in college baseball. We'll be covering that every week on SoxMachine.com. To wrap it up around Major League Baseball, Jim, big signing. Alex Bregman signs a 4-year contract with the Boston Red Sox, and not even guaranteed to play third base, maybe in second base. Alex Cora, the manager of the Red Sox, has to deal with the ego with Rafael Devers, who still maintains he wants to play third base. So that'll be kind of interesting. But for me, the big story is who lost out on Bregman. And I thought it was so funny on social media on how the reporters had what Detroit offered and what the Chicago Cubs offered Alex Bregman, both falling short. And I guess from a White Sox fan perspective, we can make fun of the Cubs for falling short again on a key free agent. But for Detroit, not that long ago, Daddy Illich would have signed Alex Bregman. There's no doubt in my mind that Detroit would have signed Alex Bregman a decade ago. But today, I just don't have that same fear anymore with Detroit spending power, Jim.
Yeah, I wonder in this case with Bregman, like how much first of all, Bregman signed a 3-year deal with the Red Sox, not 4 years. So
I'm sorry, 3 years.
So 3-year, I mean, big AAV if he sticks it all the way through. If he opts out, then it's just a smaller deal. And like when I'm seeing these opt-out heavy contracts, it makes me think like, why doesn't Jerry Reinsdorf like these again if he has the opportunity to pay somebody for 1 year rather than 5, 6, 7, 10? Like, why wouldn't he choose that? But the answer is that gives the player power, and that tends to be I think his what directs him to have the preferences that he has. But I just wonder like how much the Javier Baez deal hangs over this when it comes to getting a player who has some signs of decline in his game, like moving in this case from the Crawford boxes to Comerica, which plays quite a bit differently for a hitter like him. I could see them wanting to be like, we'd be interested in Bregman on a shorter deal that might be a depressed price. But if, Boris is trying to knock the price up and be like, no, we just rather be involved and we want Bregman to want to come here versus like overpaying to get him and then maybe have it fall apart again. So I'm not sure that this, contract is maybe the litmus test for the ultimate spending power that the new Illiches have. But it's certainly, to your point, it is a case of, even 6 years, 186 million was, I think, the reported deal that Boris says that Bregman would have signed with the Tigers had they offered it. I could see the older Illich doing that, and given the talent that they do have, saying, "Oh, we'll cross that bridge when we get to it." When it falls apart 3 years, I think just the Baez deal blowing up on them basically immediately and kneecapping what they thought was going to be a window that they could jam open. Maybe there's some PTSD from that to where like an imperfect player isn't worth splurging on to that degree because they can't spend past it the way that the older Illich did. So we'll see. Jury's still out. I was kind of hoping that they would sign Bregman because partially to inspire some spending competition in the division, which it currently lacks, but also because if it went wrong the way that, I think like Mike Petriello was on it early being like, I'm not sure Bregman's going to get the deal or like he was a bit surprised by it, but then can kind of see as the market played out slowly, like why they weren't interested. And I think like Pete Alonso had the same thing of just like, there might not be teams going 5 or 6 years on Alonso. If this is the way the market's going to be for players who are showing signs of decline and are 30 or older, perhaps it's a case where, the Tigers are waiting for the market to bend to them a little bit. And if you're a White Sox fan, like I could see if they're getting good again, like a Bregman type deal, 3 years, 120 million. Would the White Sox sign that? With opt-outs, could Chris Getz, if he's able to persuade Jerry Reinsdorf on certain fronts, to modernize his thinking when it comes to building a roster, if they are in a position where like a Bregman type would put them over the top on paper, because they have all this cost control talent, or they're really good at like putting together platoons or leveraging strengths of players and mitigating their weaknesses. Perhaps that's the kind of contract they would sign. And, they just have to be able to be I think in the interim, they have to build themselves up as an attractive landing spot to where players want to come to them. If it's, all things being equal, if I have a few teams offering the same contract, the White Sox being a place that players enjoy going to. They like the coaching staff. They like Will Venable. They hear great things. I think that's really the project for Chris Getz is, alongside all these changes he's making, have some proof that it's a place that players like going to because they get better and they get paid. And perhaps that's they can set themselves up to sign the Bregman-like contract that the Red Sox got, where it's costly on an AAV scale, but if it goes poorly, it's 3 years, and they should be able to work around it.
At least Boston should. Javi Baez, I had to look it up. $73 million still left on that deal over the next 3 years. Poor Detroit. And then finally, I thought this was interesting. James, how does this impact your fantasy baseball strategy going into knowing that Mike Trout is now moving from center to right field?
Can't rely on him either way, so relevant to him.
Oh, when that contract expires. Speaking of offering guys 3 years, $120 million, when Trout's contract expires, now that he's a right fielder after the 2030 season, they're finally going to figure it out. The White Sox are going to sign Mike Trout. He'll be 38, 39 to play right field. Bring in that money.
I like, as someone who tries to be very empathetic to players, it's jarring how much fantasy baseball is enough with no money at stake is enough to make me be like this frickin' loser about established annual producers, some of the best players in the sport. So for someone who's not trying, I can only imagine it's a path to radicalism.
Well, we'll see how he does. There's a lot of White Sox and the Angels. Man, the other rumor, too, let's see if this comes to fruition. But if the Boston Red Sox, if they're not done, and they trade for Dylan Cease, like their starting rotation is going to be Cease, Garrett Crochet, and Lucas Giolito. They would officially become the Boston Pink Sox on this podcast.
If they have a catching injury, they can, add Sebi Zavala to the active roster from the NRI.
Oh, he's on their team too.
He's an NRI right now.
They got Liam Hendricks. He'll be in the bullpen.
Lance Lynn is just out there on the market. I don't know what they're waiting on.
I think they signed Trace Thompson today.
They did. That was the other. I was trying to think of who else was there.
The Boston Pink Sox. There's a part of me that wants that to happen. Just like be part of another universe, Jim. An alternate universe. If Cease, Crochet, and Giolito all stayed in the same rotation, what would that look like? We could have that in Boston this season.
Romy's the rock of that team.
Yeah. No, if that happened, like I think we just like send James to Boston a bunch because like those are three of his best interviews as well.
I hope you like Harvard. Boston hotels are expensive. Very expensive.
Yeah, stay in Worcester and take the train in.
You haven't lived until you've had an Uber like weaving around, driving you through Cambridge in the middle of the dark at 12:30 after a 8-3 loss.
I've driven there once and never again.
No, not a drivable city. Not at all.
I'd have an Uber driver once like look at me like, do you need me to get there? You're there because there's some things I can do, but I need your sign off when I was running late to get to the clubhouse. And then I kept my head down. I didn't want to look at what he was doing.
Well, that will do it for this episode of the Sox Machine podcast. Thank you guys so much for listening. And thank you to our outstanding work down in Arizona by James this weekend to get that feature story. And we had a lot of people that did sign up on patreon.com/Sox Machine. So I want to plug that again. If you want full access to all of our coverage of White Sox spring training on the features that James is being able to get and the interviews and the insight, go to patreon.com/Sox Machine to sign up. Monthly plans start at $5. And you do get an ad-free version of both the podcast and the website too with that membership. But if you just discovered the Sox Machine podcast, you can subscribe to the show wherever you listen to podcasts such as Spotify and Apple Music. You could also listen and watch the show on our YouTube channel at youtube.com/Sox Machine and follow us on social media. We're on all the platforms at Sox Machine. You can follow James at JR Fegan, and you can follow me at SoxMachine_Josh. The Sox Machine Podcast is a production of SoxMachine.com. You're on for all things Chicago White Sox baseball and part of the Blue Wire Podcast Network. Alongside Jim Margulis and James Fegan, I'm Josh Nelson. Thanks for listening and watching.